I went after the talk show. Today we are talking about gender inclusion and representation, especially in the Jatisam and India, Sri Lanka. Um, Journalism is something that makes a lot of impact, but we don't often talk about it, in especially from a women's perspective. So today we have two amazing women with me, Dimtu Aptanayaka and Deepthi Halineti.
I got into journalism because I always wanted to be one. So by the time I was a teeny tiny teenager, I have already figured out that I want to write. I just felt there were stories to be told. What I did not know was that I was eventually going to be the voice for other people. So that's the good discovery part of it. First is about your own self-expression that you think you can find in journalism, but eventually, very quickly, it becomes a social contract. I really had no clue how important it would be to other people and how they would come to view you and your work, and as a representative of the regular person, the common person, until I really got into the field and started doing stories. So
For me, it's the complete opposite. I never thought I would be a journalist. And my undergrad is in economics and finance, and I thought I was going to be an equity analyst. And so at one point, I was working at this finance company, and I was an intern. That I was very unhappy with what I was doing. And then my sister said, "Oh, you can write, so why don't you try to be a journalist?" And I thought it was first my writing that pushed me towards journalism. And then I first started freelancing, and then at the time the editor who kept asking me to come and work full time. So I joined, and then I joined in the features, not even in the year step. But then I changed jobs after 1.5 years, and then I suddenly started being a journalist because journalism started making sense to me. I started reporting on news and audio pieces and think that it was local communities and social issues, and I started seeing the impact, and then I really, really loved it. But then I really like the work, I love the work, and I immerse myself in the work. But at one point, all just locating the industry started affecting me, especially because my family started asking, "Really, you studied economics and finance? Now you are in journalism, you are not even anywhere. Why are you doing this now? What do you see with yourself in the future?" So I left journalism at content. I thought I'm never going to come back. It's just back in 2018. And then a month, maybe not even a month after I left journalism, I got shortlisted for Consent Formulations and Journalist Award. And that sort of broke my mind because I thought, okay, I went to something that I was good at. But then I stayed out of the industry for like 2 years, I think. And then I started working on some other industries, didn't work out. And then I gradually, when I get the economics crisis, I started working on freelance like basics for like for media. Even then, I didn't want to be a freelance journalist. I thought, okay, I'll do some it because I'm good at it. But then, I'll probably be able to like shifting something else. But didn't happen. Like I kind of lost myself in my work again, and then I'm like I didn't do this for 2.5 years, and I really as you do it now. I don't think I know. We just start from like, talking about artists and journalists. We hear about six and journalists as well. So and also you talk about social content. Um, sometimes sometimes with my experiences, I kind of have felt like, okay, not all journalists and that social conscious has been then.
when we do a lot of victim blaming, I suppose, right? So there is no one single definition. I think there have been definitions. They have been evolving, quite rightly so. So when we came into the industry, it was a little mainstream, and then you had the web-based journalists, right? So eventually, from print to web-based to television, you go and you have a journey, and you're touching every point. And now there is social media, and there is this big debate. This is what you're referring to, Natasha, as to how they place themselves in what we call Sri Lanka's media landscape. So because it's so diverse, so nuanced, and so difficult, even to answer your question, I think one way of looking at it is like, see, take Dimuthu's example. So I'm a trained lawyer. She has her education, something else. But our main source of living, our livelihood is journalism, primarily. So that is one thing. We actually give our best. Whether you're a freelancer, whether you're a full timer, whether you're anything else, stringer, whatever. So that is one definition. Actually, if you were to look at it. So think about what I'm not saying as well when I say that, right? So as we expand, there are all kinds of people who come into it, and you would think that you take the phone and then you are a journalist. Journalism comes with responsibility, and you're quite right that you pointed out the fact about the social contract. It's not something we are ever told of. It's something you learn by doing. There are expectations. Whether you want to cater to those expectations is also up to you. But primarily, to be fair, I don't believe in this unbiased thing, because everybody has an innate bias. A professional journalist will treat that bias. There are conditions, situations where you really want to, your heart says, go with that, because you feel so invested. But a professional journalist would know how to treat one's bias. And this is something I have learned, many years, after many years in the industry, how to professionally treat it. It's one of the things that in our trainings that I speak about, and it's really important. So you can be a mobile-led journalist, you can be a YouTuber, you can do anything you want, but there is a primary duty to give information that is correct, authentic information, presented professionally, irrespective of the medium, right? And to work within ethical frameworks. Sure. So it takes time. It takes time to build. And I think Dimity is in that space because she's built it for herself. And we are comfortable. We are comfortable with what we do. And you don't need to be a millionaire to be telling good stories. And there is an innate sense of happiness in being able to be the journalist who can actually tell stories. Can I tell you a story?
Yes.
This social contract thing was something that I never thought of until soon after the war. And I've been covering a lot of 2009. Yeah, after 2009. Yeah. So I've been covering a lot of Tamil politics. So I realized people suddenly started sending me messages and saying that there are many issues in our areas, but nobody really reports on those. So I said, find someone to talk to. There are a lot of other journalists. But then I realized they expect it of me, because I've been for a long time been a voice, been telling stories, and I know there are better journalists. There have been more, better journalists, and many people have done this. So it was my personal experience to find that someone reaching out and saying, there is this story. Whom can I trust? And this is in this whole violent conflict scenario. You have divides across ethnicity, religion, class, which is very important. Caste, everything is here. We don't talk about it, but it exists. But in that, for somebody to reach out to me was such a, I woke up one morning and thought, no, I have to return to journalism, because I've taken a 2-year break and I've gone into civil society at that time.
And I read one of the articles about Simon Frederick's champion domestic violence, and on your reflection, I had there were anxieties reporting this way and also protecting the identity. So that is something that was very personal, very family. So we want to elaborate on that in certain eyes. What is it in just say, yeah, I want to NPC. Because there are two things. One thing is the really when going on in that climate impact and social issues in Sri Lanka, you don't have data on the section, so that'll be kind of for anecdotal threats. But then you have to also ensure that this anecdotal evidence is correct and accurate. And so because even if you when you go down to villages and ask people, you can't use the front climate change. They don't know what that is. And even if you say floods and droughts, they will just talk about the seasonal floods. And so you have to ask a series of questions to make sure that they're actually talking about the changing weather patterns and the more intense weather patterns and how they season. So that's one thing. But when it comes to gender-based violence, that's something very sensitive, especially Sri Lanka, right? Because of our patriarchal culture, we there's this notion that it says the women should not talk about their problems, like if their husband is outside of the house, which is prevalent even in the city and very much prevalent out of the city. So I like to the one thing because even when I established the link and even when I found this community, this like I they spoke about once they started trusting me, they spoke to me about it. But then I was thinking, okay, so and some of them this wanted the platform. They said they want to speak about this. Like they were frustrated, they were fed up. They were like, no, if we don't speak up, this doesn't end. So speaking up is the solution. I agree with them, but then there's also this other side of it, like speaking up on a on media rather than keep their name, and if they are abuser sees it, it might make it worse for them in the short term because at the end of the day, in Sri Lanka we are doing it, right? Like it takes so many years if there is any candidate that like say somebody uses my article and creates policy and they are trying to create regulation, this will take years, right? Like but it takes only a few seconds for somebody to fall into trouble if there because it comes after it. So because of that, or even though brown sources told me that they are okay, they are absolutely fine using their names. I did like several. I spoke to them again and again and asked, "Are you okay?" And then like with some of them, I actually choose to anonymize them instead of using their names, because sometimes so in journalism, I think some people, some journalists like once source them, okay, use our name, then use that, take that as reference and use a name. But I feel sometimes they don't have enough information to understand the actual risk involved. So I think as journalists, it's our responsibility to think through and proceed with the reaction to the meeting like words of those people. You know, it's not just it's important to report, but it's also very important to features of success. So that's what I was talking about. Yes. People we do for a girl. Yeah, things in a certain was it doing but what we actually call as a female journalist or journalist. Actually, journalist, because there's these conversations that happens always when we talk about a woman, a journalist who happen to be a woman, it's always female journalist. Do you want to add something on that?
Okay, it's like the gender pay gap, right? So there is a discussion around gender, and it should be more robust, it should be stronger, it should be more diverse, and it should be more nuanced, and it should be unpacked for everybody. This is one of the reasons. If you talk about women and if you talk about feminism, they're bad words, by the way, Natasha. You know, feminists are either all feminists are like in bad relationships, they are divorced, they are single mothers,
and want to break up others' relationships.
that's
so
right. They have no
marriages,
respect for other people's relationships. Sorry, that's very generalizing. A generalization by me. But it's important to understand where we come from. She spoke about patriarchy, so I'll take a clue from that. We understand that we are living in a patriarchal society, and it's been a hard battle for women to bring certain issues to the table, to have this conversation, with a crew, female crew, female speakers, and female or women. So that being the question. Feminism has evolved to the extent that all marginalized communities, clearly we keep them outside, they are privileged. And for saying this, I've been like, not completely attacked all the time. And it's okay, right? So anyone else who has that feeling of marginalization, sometimes I feel marginalized for the political views I hold, for being offensively honest, right? So if people think being a Sinhala, of Sinhala ethnicity or belonging to the Buddhist community gives you certain privileges, I'd be one to say, like, talk to me. Talk to me. I never felt this way. I never felt privileged. I've always felt the pain because less. Having said that, I would say less. Obviously, I'm protected by this majority thing, right? And I'm not denying that. And also working in this English language journalism. So I think it's important to say women from my perspective again, because it includes everyone who does not want, because when you say female, the identity is connected to your genitals. So you don't need to get there. It's about it's
your ability to reproduce.
yes. So we don't need to get there. But a woman, when you say a woman, it's a lot more inclusive. So I prefer that.
It's a hard industry, especially for a woman to make it into the top. When you make it into the top, then you get questions about like, are you being enough for to make it approachable for other women? Do you feel it is your responsibility, or is it like is it hard enough for you to exist as it is there with all the men? So it's like, it's a collective effort that everyone has to put in. It's not just your responsibility.
It's mine and collective. And in the newsroom, I've noticed until you got to the top position of being editor, you are in a way, protected in a certain way. And I once again repeat that I understand my privileges of ethnicity, religion, of the language I choose, and the newsrooms I belong to, and being able to contribute to the international media. So I understand that. But I think it's useless to be talking about privilege if you don't make use of that privilege for the betterment of others. So if you feel that you have a few things more, then please use it for the betterment of others and share the goods. So in newsrooms to get promoted, statistically, it's very, very difficult. So in the newsroom, like in the labor market, we think a lot of women work. It's true. We have a lot of women working, but economically active population is 72% of male and 30-something for women. So it does say something, within the country. So I'm not talking about migrant workers and all that. So it's important to think about that. And with all that, we have a significant gender pay gap also, and this is historically been so, these two factors. So it comes to the newsroom too. Newsroom is part of this community, this country, this society. So we are definitely a reflection of that. Because we have a face or a name, it becomes so obvious for other people to track it, right? So when you come to the leadership position, you have to prove that you're better than most. You are consistently proving to the rest of the community that you got there the right way. You did not sleep your way through. Now this has been, I'll say this, right? And at the same time, thankfully, people have not said that. And that is also because I think you can actually do it in a way that, you will, you have worked hard, you've stayed enough, you've given your best and got there. But once you get there, only that men suddenly find that, in the status quo, these positions that they held for so long in this newspaper industry, which is 100 plus years old, Sri Lanka has produced a handful of women editors. So I understand again, it's a privilege to be one of those, right? Because if it was such a common experience, there would be many, many more. It's not. So in the English newsrooms, the production is slightly higher. Yeah. And in the Sinhala newsrooms, way less. I'm waiting for the Tamil newsrooms to come to that. And again, I'm going to get targeted for this one. I'm forever the, moving target for a lot of people who say, oh, you made an issue and you made this statement about this journalist from this English newsroom. We do take up issues affecting women journalists, and I think we should, rightfully so, because they don't get the traction. Institutions love to keep them down, silence them within and institutionally silence them. The mechanisms are never really supportive.
So that's where the collectivism is important. So you have a
your job is to create mechanisms where even when you're out, others will have the space and the opportunity to be protected and treated equally, and there will be fair opportunity for them to further their careers. And it's like real work in progress, but we have actually prepared documents, drafted policies, done research way back in 2012, looking at gender in the media landscape, the Sri Lankan media landscape, which is available there online, and all these issues. And there was a major reckoner. In the newsroom, 29% of the women said they were sexually harassed.
I think Me Too movement started by journalists in 2021, at least. Yes, and what happened to that actually?
Well, it started, so that's when I got attacked. Oh, she comes from a newsroom which is English, so she's an English language journalist. So you say the same thing. And then there was this journalist from a television station, one of the national television stations. And we took on that case. And when you want to beat somebody up, you never really look for that other example. You only think about what you want to. So this is also the way in which this is a narrative creation, right? Journalists and the community, the people, society, they're capable of creating narratives. In these narratives, they frame women journalists too, in a way. So
Yes, it is. And so to say this, I think I also have this feeling, especially about this, like working as a visitor during my early days. I think I'm doing this working, I think, yes, especially in talking for patriarchy and perception and gender bias towards gender. So sometimes there are extensive that, especially when it comes to all the male editors who are very supportive opinions, like me as a journalist, but some always used to think my male peer is better than me at working as an article, which may be in reality was not the case. Yeah, so that was very frustrating for you. Like, I one year through there was this editor who was fully excited, and he was like 1 years old, and I was like, but he kept 30 years in me. You wouldn't have enough experience. You have people know this. So give it to him because he's better than you. Because anyway, it's a story you can write. So instead we work on this kind of story, but what that needs more depth than investigation and more factual dominant knowledge is being very integration, right? So there are instances like that.
So she got stated.
Yes. Yeah.
And also not giving the opportunity to get the experience if that's well.
Yes, that's that. I think that's really terrible.
Because how would she know if she was really, get now in the field and do it? And so we don't have access, right? A lot of women don't get the opportunity. First one is that the sticky floor is worse than the plastic exam.
And the other thing was like, so this is like the second test. And the most frustrating part was that at my earlier days, I did not exactly this kind of experiences. I just I was like 1.5 hours, so I ran down for years into the answer by this one. So I knew the basics. And I was not even like, new as a reporter. So then I was still thinking, okay, at my earlier years, I worked with the stories, and now I have come here and I'm stuck here too much. Writing all the stuff which maybe they wanted with that. But then again, like when it comes to section, I was still playing. I mean, I would say I have been on the lucky ones, and I have experience verbal section harassment enough, but nothing too easy about this one is doing stuff. So in the newsrooms, that usually, I think it's a stereotyping interview, but usually this is thing that's all very main and journalists who come after the journalists in the newsroom. Like, something interesting is that everybody knows so when you first join, like, something literally just sit and stay away from the intro, this and this. So I like one hand, I don't know, like everybody knows, like nobody's saying things tangible.
They don't address the problem.
Yeah.
Like don't ask, don't tell something you know, but like you don't do it.
It's normalized. It's accepted as a character trait.
So
Yeah.
is it because like they have the power or
Funny thing.
Yeah, I had this experience. One of them were kind of coming towards me and like no one physically harassed the women. And another one of my male friends, he was, I really appreciate it still, 2 weeks ago. He got him and turned to me and said, run, and I ran. So I had an experience about that. But I kept a process also when I didn't want to that is because somebody intersected that I would kind of,
Usually you can't like any of us.
Yeah.
You can do it. You're not sure whether you're lucky or not.
yeah, I mean, it's a very relative thing.
I saw.
yes.
I'm lucky to have been part-time, got that person, not having to go through the full experience.
Sometimes like
Yeah.
when we have to experience it every day, when we don't have to go through all the way, feels like we are.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was in the same situation.
No, but now when I look back, so now as an independent, and like I work from home, I don't have a office to go. And I realized how free my head is to work on the actual story that I had to work on, rather than like having to spend half of my brain thinking how am I going to escape this guy? How am I going to deal with this other like situation at like office, and how am I going to manage money and finances? But I will get my chair and then they ask me this question. So like I think for me personally, like working independently has been very good because in some of those external factors that impacts your like productivity has gone out of my system. So I can like really focus on my work. I work very long hours. I was like sometimes 16 hours, but I'm very happy doing this because I'm happy about the work and I don't have to deal with unnecessary stresses that comes in the, comes from working in the news schools. Like basically being the narrations of this.
I understand.
But what she's saying is that the system doesn't support her to stay in. Is that a great thing? And she's saying that, all those external pressures that I feel, if I was in this regular mainstream newsroom, they're now absent. So I can concentrate and I work better. But she should have been able to do the same thing in a newsroom. And this is our ask, that the newsrooms must understand and acknowledge that women also need to not be tolerated, but you have to create this safe, happy workplace. And it is technically your job to do that. And, within the legal framework we have in this country to avoid discrimination and to support our labor laws, with these two alone, we should create conditions for a woman to just come and work in the newsroom without, anyone, without feeling in any other way, right? To be, and also, along with that, I'm sure Dimuthu is very happy, but so am I. But I always tell women, don't quit, only because some people have to stay and fight, have that good fight. And second thing, you're in mid-career, and people like her being eliminated at this level means that you can actually, when it is the time to fill those leadership positions, she's already eliminated. She's out of the system. But with all the sensibilities and the experience she shares here, she would have been a great asset in a newsroom to empower other women, to create a better space. So what I see is the loss of the industry.
So again, are there any support systems that she should have gone like? That's where I asked that question. Is it her responsibility to just power through when she doesn't have any support system? So
I guess yes and no. Yes and no, because it's always like that, right? There's more gray than black and white. Yes, because, this is where you want to be. And I have a right to be. Now, this is how I say it, but it has taken me long years to get to that point of saying, I want to be here and nobody's going to, push me out of it because I have made a decision to stay here. But I know it takes a lot of time, experience, and get, survival skills and a lot of stuff to get there.
And thick skin as well.
I'm not too sure about that, but they assume that we have thick skin, right? There are a lot of assumptions out there. And second thing is, of course, the institutions have to create conditions. We have been talking about an inclusive media, and we've been talking to the state apparatus on creating policies about portrayals. If she's unable to do in-depth stories, and there is this major stereotype thinking that a guy is capable of doing an in-depth report and she should be doing some fluffy stuff, with all due respect to all the fluffy stuff person, because that's out there is an audience. But what does it mean? That means that there's a portrayal within the newsroom, and we are trying to fight portrayals outside. You're stereotyping your own colleagues and not giving them the space. So we have been pushing. We have got this gender charter for newsrooms. Nobody wants to adopt it. Now we can't go there and by force ask them to adopt it. But we have had it for 10 years and it's a South Asian document. Because all the countries with these women journalists have accepted that institutional mechanisms are necessary. This is about not just her, it's about every woman journalist and the ones who want to come into newsrooms. You need institutional mechanisms that will make us feel safe, secure and capable of doing her work, and also assessing her for her qualifications, for her experience and the strength she brings to the newsroom. Nothing else should matter, because those are the indicators you will use against a male colleague, right? So use the same against a woman. Understanding equality is not always the issue. There has to be equity, because equity is raising the one who doesn't necessarily have or had that opportunity. So generally speaking, some of us are more privileged again, but when we say, oh, a woman doesn't know how to speak, a woman doesn't know how to do that assignment, did you ever try her? Did you create opportunities for them to actually experience that? So equity would be to raise and create those opportunities for them to experience that. Then judge her whether she's on par with her male colleagues. Until such time, you really need to understand that the mechanisms have to be put in place. Only then, when it's a safe, equal space, that you should start comparing. Until then, it shouldn't.
I mean, at that time I did have support from for the stories I had support, but financially I did not. I also career progression wise there was no indication of we like, because I like, we know, like spoken about, salary and how it is, and then I was at least being like point in my career, like I could have been promoted like one level further, but there was not offer.
Very genuinely.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I felt that I don't have confidence. But now looking back, I feel like this is something I'm pleasantly surprised about what we call media. I never been censored for single my myself. I thought I did tell you that it's anything for your prices probably did up to now. Even the things I thought might be censored didn't get censored. So now I realize how much censorship was there, and like how how restricted I was. So even that I'm really happy about it. And like it's just that sometimes that censorship is not like median, but sometimes your seniors censorship affects you. Because personally I don't think that because I don't come from I come from different areas, right? And I also am going to journalism school, so I don't have whatever like you haven't been molded yet. No, but molded, and that I was not like trained with like traditional way Christians were trained with, and with that I also haven't picked up on the perceptions here as well. So I pick up from the background that I've been come from, right? My family background, where I studied, and that's the way I feel, which is a little different from the way my senior editors at that time. So that's very different with the way I think. And so I felt that like somehow within my character, like one censored about things that were really not needed to be censored, like very small, tiny piece, nobody would pay attention to sometimes.
They're constantly correct.
Yeah, but I am mathematic.
So we spoke about feminist woman and this industry, but do you feel there's a discrimination when it comes to audience? If the audience also discriminate because of being a female name or like it is, or
Do you want to go first? No, I would love to.
So audience, especially you get discriminated when you say something that favors, right? For me personally, if you like question if you question the popular narrative and you report on something that they don't want to hear, then you get you get called all kind of things, and then you get questioned your reputation, your credibility, how you lead yourself while you're working on it. And this is not just about the audience, right? It's sometimes a thing about the express that you speak, like when you have there's this, in Sri Lanka, as we spoke earlier, like journalism is not seen as a respectable profession. And the other thing is, journalists are not seen as people with brains. People must justify that kind of journalism. I don't insist that people really got a brain, right? Yeah, and because of that, some experts, I absolutely root for you. And I think, especially when I was younger, like when I was starting out as a young reporter, there was this one instance. I asked an expert for court to give me something higher, right? Then I wanted an elaboration, and he was so rude to me. And I haven't gone through this before, right? Because my first time out somewhere I actually cried, right? Then my editor was like, didn't know what to do with me, and she was like, no, don't worry, please, like that. This is how it is, that's the thing.
that is normal that you are.
Normalized.
Yeah. Now and later, when people say things like that, you don't even feel it. You're like, what is how exciting that he said something to me, but I never mind, and you just go on with your work. So it's that normalized, and it's that common that you become numb to it at a point. And
It's because you have more authority or agency now, and so the other person is not quick enough to sort of put you down.
agency, yeah, pretty. And And also, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think when your byline becomes like seen around a bit, they kind of, which again is, I think, discrimination because the young reporters see we opportunity to learn and grow and go for good articles, right? There was no point. Like, I mean, there's pressure from the industry, and if there's pressure from outside of the industry, we're going to be very, very demotivated. So that is good. And I mean, perception is like a lot of, and also because there's, I think, young female, like, not even young, I think female reporters are seen in a kind of like male reporters. Yeah, sometimes I go that way. So, I think it's seen as, I think this is what I felt. I think they feel that we are very smart. We know our subject a little bit less. We don't have the domain knowledge about also soft. Yeah. And especially for me, that's soft influence because I'm so I think I'm more open and ambivert these days actually. But when I started up, I'm something introvert and I'm more calm, right? Like so I will not lose my head to be positive and everything, keep reality. And that they take for weakness, and then they feel, oh, we can, easy talk over there. We can walk over the mouth and and say all this that kind of thing to her. So that is
Although it kind of feels like it's not about journalism, it's about contemporary story. It comes to other people. Like, I think it's all because journalism is one profession where young women go out and interview these important things, like interrogate meetings with these important people. Because in a corporate, you have to, I don't know, you have to be in your 40s or 50s by the time you go up for a meeting. Right? Journalism gives you an agency. You are a big crime, you learn how to talk to different, like, that were CEOs, like all kinds. Right? And also these people, I think extra also must be that they have their own burden and okay. They also might be confused. So one, and now I am speaking to a person who is probably the age of my intern.
They actually call and ask, like, why did you send that junior report? I've had those.
Yeah.
So is
But
it
I
an ego
tell-
problem that they expect
I
you
think
to
it's
have
about the expectation of that so-called body of knowledge that you're supposed to have, and then they just look at the person and think, oh, you're female. On top of that, you are looking young, so might not necessarily work. Yes, men in authority have issues with that. It's not always the case. It's true. It's people of authority have some expectations. So I've had some very interesting experiences too. But I started off as a parliament reporter.
So
at
you
the age
said
of 19.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're very
so-
young, right?
Yeah,
So
so 3 months out of school, and then I'm about to enter law college. So I thought I'll do it for a while. So this is how it happened. So I had all the expectations of going back, leaving the newsroom and doing it, as a part-time thing. But things changed. Yeah. So I was told every Sunday I would pull a lot of stories, and I used to work really hard. And I don't need to come, in a public forum like this and say I didn't have affairs with politicians, but I was often accused of this. Yeah, my friends, people I grew up with, they were named, they were shamed, and there were senior editors at that time who used to say, all you do is you go to that parliament lobby and sit there and stories fall into your lap. I never forgave that person. I didn't even, I never really forgave that person for saying that. Because we really worked hard to get those stories, understanding the constraints that a woman has. Too much of proximity means there's a lot of trouble, right? They think you're easy, and then they have all kinds of other offers to make. And I've had a lot of those. And there used to be this offensive thing I used to say, that if I were to write that story about some politicians I know, your families won't really stick with you, because I know a lot of shit that has happened. And because every day for plus 10 plus years I've been covering, and I've been seeing them at close quarters. And it's about how you also tell yourself, you have to have your own code. You don't know, nobody tells you what to do. My editors would say go for these parties, go for these meetings. You are being trained to become a political correspondent. Hats off to them. These were men who wanted me to get there, right? So, and they were supportive. I will always say this. I had some of the finest of editors and some little problems here, there, of course, and largely because there was no gender understanding. Yeah, but so largely it was an okay experience.
So back then, were there less women
Of course.
journalists comparatively now?
In numbers,
Yeah.
a little less, but I think women were there. In numbers, we are really there now. But the numbers don't necessarily you get translated into that decision making slot. I used to always think it's about decision making at the editorial level, where the women will actually make decisions on behalf of the content, related to content. For the longest period of time, this was my conviction that women should be there. This is why I said that, right? So that women making those decisions. But I also think beyond that is the governance level of a media house. Now my thing is about not just here, but also up there, because that is only when these mechanisms you're talking about can be created. If the management doesn't support the editorial, this is not going to come to pass. So you need women, you need inclusive women, not just these flower pot women. And they love to flower pot us, right? So they treat us like soft, sweet, very feminine kind of thing. I've been told all of these things. Obviously, she has been told the same things. But the fundamental mistake is they treat us also. And treat us also like that. And then a couple of times, a couple of experiences, then they realize it's not going to happen. So because I was doing this very hard beat, very, very hard to do politics, and very few women were doing political reporting, or were encouraged to do parliament, it was said a man would cover better. So in the newsroom, when I was a parliament reporter, the courts reporter gets to go on this orientation tour to see how Lok Sabha works. Right? And then somebody in the office said, are you feeling sorry for yourself? It should have been yours. And I was 22. And I thought, oh, well, it's okay. I mean, I didn't really process it. But today, I think if it happened to someone else, I would have fought for that person. Especially if it was a woman and a younger person, I would have fought for it. But I didn't fight for myself. I did not even know. But it didn't matter in the long run. About the audience. The audience sees women very differently. Unfortunately, you're talking about empathy. Empathy is a long way off for Sri Lankans. Unfortunately, if we had empathy, we would not do this victim blaming we do consistently. We know who's marginalized in a society and who's privileged in a society, in a place like ours. So patriarchy gives you the framework within which you are always attacking the person who's already marginalized. Be it a woman, be it a religious minority, ethnic minority, viewpoint minority like me, often in the absolute way within minority of people who will have an alternate viewpoint. So we are always open game. So women are called sluts, men are called studs for the same work they do. Men are brilliant. Women are doing it because they had either a sugar daddy, some women. I'm not saying these things didn't happen. People are people will do many things. So for a woman to have a sugar daddy, there has to exist a sugar daddy too, right? So she's not doing it on her own and all by herself. So the sugar daddy exists. And they support those women who will be at their beck and call and do things according to their thinking. It's narrative control within a newsroom. It's not just controlling the reporter, it's not just controlling the assignments, it's also controlling the narrative. So all that self-censorship that comes also comes in that form also. How are we experiencing the internet? Natasha, you would be a great example of this. We experience the internet very differently. There are a million studies, and it's a space I work on, calling for femtech and policies that where policies and technology that are led by women globally, because we're just 2% in the tech field.
2%.
Just 2%. I've been doing a lot of research because I'm currently working on this, so therefore I remember that. So if you have that kind of minuscule representation, naturally our experience in that world is going to be pretty flawed, right? It's false and flawed. You get attacked, you don't know what to do, you don't know where to go, how to complain, how to get redress, and how to address your trauma. So when a male colleague is attacked online, audience, they will, what would they say? They would say that they will attack the content. If it is a woman, you will be immediately objectified. They will be sexualized, and they will also, yes, and then sensationalized, and then they will also call you slut, and then there will be a lot of other things. And mind you, what have I heard? I have been called a terrorist, a slut, companion for several politicians, God knows what. I'm looking for those to have this life that they think I should be having, but which is really dull and non-existent. And also that they also ridicule the effort you put in to become the journalist. Yeah, if you see some power in a particular journalist, it's come with a lot of suffering. Everybody, even in these privileged places, they have gone through a lot of stereotyping, a lot of discrimination to get there. Nobody had it easy, including me, and I had it easy. But even then, as I said, I had it easy because there was career progression. So that's why I say it easy. But at the audience level, our audiences are so media illiterate often, right? And that's another topic that we really work on. You have never had the conversation as to how do you respond to content. You don't like content, just switch off. Yeah, if you don't like it, don't read. And also, can we be decent? When I say decent is a bad word, because what is decency? Like empathy. So if you're not decent, you wouldn't understand empathy. Empathy is to walk in someone else's shoes and hopefully understand how that person feels. But we don't want to do that because we take this narratives. There are multiple narratives here, and the dominant narratives support only those who are in dominance in terms of ethnicity, religion, or power, political or social power. So those narratives are getting challenged when women speak up. So you need to put them down and make them invisible or voiceless. And by driving Dimtu out of the newsroom, they have invisibilized her in a way, but she's managed to keep her name and keep her work going.
I think it's because now we have all three options as well, but in your time, it didn't exist, right? It's now
No, there's what we have put there.
So always said, I never felt that I had no option.
So that's it's not how do you say? You need to kind of know that the option is available also. Like for example, if I knew I would work independently like this when I left the full-time journalism, I would have shifted to that. But I didn't. I wasn't sure how to work that part. Like you need to understand how to create your link and it there. So it took me like 2 years to understand how to create the link and start working in the night. Which isn't, I think it's like you need to put in some extra work to understand that's real. Because it's not clear, but I do for people you have been working for 30 years. Okay, I level 2. So will you see that is it getting better? The sexual harassment or stereotyping, is it getting better or is it getting worse? But
It's difficult to generalize, Natasha, but I think there is more awareness. Certainly, this conversation couldn't have had a few years ago. That is an indicator that at least we are talking about these issues. And Me Too happened because of pain. Yeah. And you also see the pushback, how the vilification of those women happened. And why were you silent for all this time? And I have only one answer to those people. And generally speaking, again, because each will have their own, reasons and a setting. How do you speak when you're disabled? When your backdrop is so not enabling you to speak and highlight. I would like to draw from a research from the 2012, that's the International Federation of Journalists, and I was the researcher for Sri Lanka. So this 26 or 29% of women either experiencing sexual harassment or knowing that person's colleague went through that was such an alarming thing for me to actually get through a survey. So things have changed, things have evolved, the conversations have improved, more women have come out. But at that time when we were doing this survey, before that we had this round table called Stories That Women Tell. Actually, it should be about stories women don't tell. Yeah? Because that was the first time I spoke about sexual harassment. It has taken me, for all the empowerment I speak of, it's taken this long journey. So I think it's important to understand everything is a journey. And Me Too didn't happen then, and it is happening now, and it's happening in Sri Lanka so recently for a reason. People are disempowered to the extent that you cannot speak about it, and you have male colleagues who will immediately make sure that you leave the newsroom. It happened. So we documented. One of the nicest things about this research was that I was able to actually capture those stories with anonymity being accorded to those people. I captured how newsrooms and how the bosses worked against, some women, and generally your supervisor is a male. Generally, supervisors are male, no? They have more authority, they have more power, they have more brains, she says, right? And they can do in-depth stuff. So it's so laughable. uh, but I think most women who came from newsrooms that are not in Colombo did not speak. And when we started speaking, I remember my experience was when I was about 22, 3, and I was overseas on an assignment, and I got locked up. It's taken a lot of courage to actually stand up and say this, because people think, oh no, you actually went into that place with that person. Yeah. Actually, someone locking or trying to lock you up is not something that they, the woman gets, the victim blaming is like perfect, right? So we worked on that, and I've written to those authorities, but at 23 it took me a lot of courage, and I understood my vulnerability, that I would not be believed. It's just me, it's just him. So I told this story, and it also compelled me to become a safety trainer for women journalists, because you also have to put this, your own experiences and bring some learning so that we can all share and make sure that another person will not go through the same thing. These women did not respond, and I don't want to mention, the newsrooms in the north and the east and far south and central Sri Lanka. There was deafening silence. And then eventually, when I started saying that it's difficult for me, it's very difficult for me to share this. One is trauma. One is that I get judged the moment I say this. Clearly, I get judged. So I understand that. It took me a lot of courage and a lot of time to stand there and say, like, okay, you judge me and I don't care. It's work in progress, right? And the moment I said that, and I placed myself as a vulnerable person or with someone who had vulnerabilities, those women started speaking. They said, it happened to me. How does it happen? You have a news story, so you take the news story to the news editor and you give the story like this, right? And he has to touch your hand. This is approval for your copy. And there was a journalist, as senior as I am, and slightly senior than me. It took her all that time to open her mouth and say, I had to actually let him touch my hand to get my story through. Excuse me, how did this become part of your TOR, to be touched by your supervisor?
I think sometimes it becomes your reality and you don't know how to get around.
Because you have no, see, if you want to shift newsrooms, we can. We will switch. I have switched.
And we haven't even questioned who must have got switching, by the way.
Yeah.
I think I jumped from one newsroom to the other.
But the English journalists, we work in another language. Again, understanding that we are a small number of people here and we are privileged. This journalist came from a Tamil newsroom, Tamil language newsroom. If she were to switch, the boss is going to talk to the other boss, next boss. There is no employability of these people. And so it's a small industry. Sri Lanka's industry is very small, so within which you have to circulate. So I'll probably be highly unemployable by the mainstream industry because I speak too much. And I'll tell them a few things, right? So, but that's okay. That's perfectly okay. Because we are happier doing what we do. But I see why people don't speak. That why people cannot switch. It's not an equal newsroom space. It's not a place where they could not even speak. I've seen this happen to other journalists in other countries too, women journalists. This conversation is one of the most stark and most painful. I've seen women cry after donkey's years of, like decades after, because that broke them. That drove them to be silent and change your behavior in the newsroom. And you try to dress like a man, you try to walk like a man, you try to talk like a man and boss like a man.
Then justificates that what happened.
It is that. I actually used to dress ugly to put it in plain words because I was at somebody could drop me, but it looked at a girl push.
Should we laugh? But yes.
Yeah, we shouldn't laugh. We laugh because we can see the situation, and now we are in a space where we can laugh at it. But we are not laughing at those women who are going through that experience.
Who are there now? Yes, it's not. And I know this as, so if you, even for me, for my work and everything influenced during the time that I worked for a few years, I had seen it if there was very supportive or that we were conservative, and during that few months you would see my work improved, it was like this and it was like this. We could see that. And I had few male interests who were supportive of me also. Like they sometimes often like, they stop me saying, what, try for this program, do this. They never improve. Well, and they take these stories seriously when there is somebody of this, especially the female editors. I think they try they try to do their best, and they know that jazz sometimes is a place we don't know that. It's like sometimes they also can be, because they also have their own government sometimes. They manage, right? So that is there. And even about the media movement, I think so there were some names were thrown around, but I don't think all of the names are thrown around. I think it was the less powerful names that were thrown around.
Also, I have a lot of private conversations, Natasha. It's a great moment, Timothy, to speak about it. And we have this group. We both belong to that group. She's one of our new members. So we have a little group of women journalists. I get personal messages. Can you do this? But these are the moments when you realize you do have some agency, that you have to, get out and do something. But this is happening. This happened to this colleague. This happened to that colleague. Can you do something about it? Can you issue a statement? Can you do, show some support, solidarity kind of thing? It still happens in these individual messages, and I keep saying, but why? We have created this space. But having said that, I say why, but at the same time I know why, because in that group also there will be others who are judging them. So they obviously don't want to say these things in this open space.
So it's with the culture as well, developing a culture that they encourage you to talk about things that are happening for us. So that starts it into realism and skin, they do the best. And like you said that when you started out, you were singing that.
Yeah, no, I was very much singing agency. So was I.
So it would really, like, we understand, like, you feel that your personality also changes across the time when you are.
But yes, definitely. And now I think I'm more secular person. And I mean, you spoke to me in back in 2017. I would have taken it. I am talking to the wrong limit. So I think that also so then like when the person like these people who I really need to do but there's no stand. Hey, I can do it. Then because really not sleep out. It becomes first. But sometimes speaking also makes things worse for you also, because I know mine over the female in the cutting to try to speak about him and when to get the experience that's a bit. Yeah.
So probably it's basically is a really like your personality changes because you have to be on par with the other your counterparts.
I think I had to learn to be competitive and not necessarily to prove. Again, I refer to having that very good editors. I had very good male editors and a female editor, very enabling. So I think in that sense I was very lucky, very fortunate. But this quiet, gentle being has evolved into something else. Obviously, it happens in time. And it's not only because of the newsroom, but also the external factors. To be assertive is a requirement. Yeah. And also, when you come to the management positions of editorially managing things, I've had women who told me, like, I prefer a male boss. Straight to my face. Yeah. I say, good luck to you. Yeah.
So they have a rationale.
I don't blame that girl, that particular person. The reason is, that's the normal. This is all you know, this is all you see. And so you think boss is always male. And my letters that I received, because I was running the investigations desk, would be always addressed to Mr. underneath. So there was an assumption that I was male, and only a man would be running an investigations desk. Here was a 4-member female team doing investigations and every week telling stories about corruption and lack of governance in Sri Lanka. But we were all women, and everyone ended up being an editor. So I think we have had some great inspirational stories there. But about the behavior, I think we learn to speak less and trust less. And I think that's not a nice thing, because your real personality is controlled and contained because of the administrative requirements, plus the way you get judged. I knew I was always getting judged for the way I dress, to the way I speak, and openly saying you're privileged and being told, like, you're this, that, the other. But you can't really, one thing is they could not question why as to why I'm sitting there. I've really come the hard way and then slowly got there because they expect us to be demure, so quiet, so ladylike. About the dress code, Dimuthu made this point. And interesting, I did the reverse. I've always done that because conformity was, something that I wanted to challenge because I'm not there because of what I wear or how I look like. And I just want to be taken seriously for the work I do. And it's not, even now, sometimes they ask, do you want to wear a sari?
This is a very interesting conversation because for me, recently what I have advice, I have gotten this advice saying you have to play the day, which is like you're controlling. Otherwise, you might have to go through what I went through again. So that is the general advice that I have gotten from shopping places. So it was very needing to really like needing conforming this term.
For me personally, it took me, I think, like I am so much stressed from all this stress for them, how you perceive, and like I was constantly told that I still like sometimes I still talk to my neighbor, like so, for example, and friends here, right? I did everything. I was considered everyone looked like a journalist, and I was like, how different was the next time? Like I asked this now, like with one of my neighbors, like Shelly. Yeah. Then I started being that, right? I started breathing down, like, and it took me a while even after leaving the industry to get back to this because I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna, like, it's a self-expression. Yeah, I'm not going to, understand anymore. I'm going to do good, like, because that's dressing nice and you do good and, like, doing good work also. That people think we think some certain, like, they can't exist together. Then they think, like, people like I'm in the pieces like I guess you
And that we are alcoholics
do
too.
good, undress good, can't do good work. And also that the brain, no brain thing also comes with when you guess nice, it automatically translates into being not so intelligent as well. I have experienced that as well. I think that is also something, but what is I think for journalists in general, I think.
Yeah, they have been asked, like, are you model? Do you do stuff like that? I'm like,
recently I've been going to India on the event consultants, and then I've been hearing certain names that of journalists that the politically victimized, and those are same names that we hear, disrespect names, and we don't hear female names in those categories. But I do have, I do know certain female journalists that have been politically victimized and had to get out of the country as well. So is that also a part of patriarchy that even in that space that we don't hear female headlines, serious names in that country?
That's a very interesting question, something we really should have thought of. I think in terms of, so again, it goes to who is visible, who gets to play the role of leader, and majority would be male, and women will be less. And I've had women leaders, and some have fled, forced to leave this country. But also there are the women who are here, women in leadership who are equally attacked on a regular basis, and they are still going through that. It's a choice. Natasha, your reference point is also the period of violent conflict, I think. Conflict definitely is not normal, and at such times in any part of the world there will be so much that is happening, so much that is concealed from the normal eye, and it gets normalized too. Brutality, violence, lack of empathy got normalized because of that. Because we were, this is all I knew in the newsroom. I walked into a newsroom and there was war to cover. Everybody's doing a story, right? So in that, natural leadership is always accorded to men because there are beats. So discrimination, so the beat discrimination is also there. Politics, defense, finance. So there are male beats, there are female beats. Mercifully, I broke the mold right at the beginning. I said, I'm not covering those things. And no offense to those women and men, whoever who wants to cover. I did eventually come back to music and fashion and all of that because I like that. But it doesn't mean that I can be diverse, right? So we can be many things we want. But those beats are male preserves, largely, even today. So in that, if you are also in unions and organizations, we have media organizations. You have tokenistic women. Women are used as, just symbols of power and, representation, but you're really, your voice is crushed often. And I know there are women who are just pioneering souls here who will not be quiet, but they are very few. And then you will see in a protest moment, you will see more men talking about it. You will also see more men attacked because also they are out there and they are also in leadership. Who gets attacked? Those who are there. So if you have a male majority in newsrooms and in leadership and doing critical work, and this is never to take it away from the women who have been doing tremendously good work. And unfortunately, I'm limited by my understanding of the industry to the English newsrooms. But I know my Tamil colleague got abducted. She never got the eyeballs that those other people did. And she's still here. She's still working. But you're right. There are enough numbers if we were to look at the ways in which women are victimized. And women are victimized also differently, not just by being driven out. The conditions will be so difficult for you to actually work and come back and be accepted in a newsroom. That makes it all the more difficult for a woman to come back. That is also why sexual harassment is not being spoken of, because if you come back and talk about it, the whole world, comes crashing down around you. But yeah, there are a lot of women, at least some women we know of. Their stories are less emblematic. Never used.
Yeah. And I also think that's again part of your way your work is pursuing. Then and when it comes to a woman who is victimized, I think it's totally a personality is present as well. That way, when it's a and they don't talk about anything else. Like all these journalists and the journalists. But when it's a woman, oh, she's been victimized, but she's also this and this and this. Yeah.
Generally, there are a lot of affairs.
Yes. But if everybody knows how hard we work, how many hours you have to do to work, sorry, you want to how we find.
I'm looking for that life they say that I've been having of, partying and hanging out with people. And actually, there was a story about me and then my other female colleague who is currently editing a national newspaper. So both of us went on an investigation when we were really young and not rookie, but rookie journalists, but we went on this assignment. This was a politician of a particular political party, a smaller political party. They also have their publication. Both of us got really fired and there was a lot of slut shaming right there. And both of us sat there and I said, so what about this story? So where are the references to our story? You do a lot of stuff about us. And so if we are partying and hanging out with people and having this major life, so why are we in the newsroom at 11:30 in the night and still pushing pages? I really wish I had that existence. So that's what happens. Nothing about what you did. No responses to the content. But a lot of women actually understand and accept that this is how it's going to be. If you're going to stay on, you're going to take it like a man on your sleeve.
Now talk about self-censorship, you talked about that as well. Because I kind of feel like now maybe I am self-censoring myself when I am 20. But you said that you should never do that. But also there's the safe speak merit, and also it's not just the safe speak merit, then the whole audience that I have to go through if I aggravate someone. So sometimes it feels like I'd much rather self-censor and stay in my cocoon, safe cocoon. But I don't want to be that as well. I really do be out of that.
There have been days when I have been silenced. There have been days and years when I have gone underground and stayed quiet. So I know what it is like. But to come out and own your space is what I would advocate for anybody, because it's easier to give up. And invisibilizing women and taking away their agency and their voice is something that is so deeply patriarchal, so misogynistic, and such a part of our society that it deserves that much of resistance. We were talking about people driven out of this country, so I'd like to. I just acquired this book recently, and I'll read a small section. It's called The Betrayal. All of you will know what I'm talking about or reading of. It says, the cock crowed once, chest torn apart, heart squeezed and crushed, high on blood and sighs for filthy lucre, shielding their heads with glass, hiding their bloody buttons in sheets of old newspaper, covering their weapons like a rotting fish, destroy like worms the tree of love and life. The cock crowed twice, the honest man demonized again, cocky in thinking only the powerful are strong, the innocent life they pushed hard into the soil. The cock crowed thrice, the newspaper you built on tears, written with blood and sweat, to fulfill a vision for your motherland. Even the garments of the Lord were sold for money, your soul sacrificed for free speech, your legacy sold to the murderers for a pot of honey. So this is from The Land My Father Gave Me by Sonali Samarasinghe, a journalist driven out of this country into exile. She was my editor.
Yeah, I kind of like to write a lot, a little bit more to know how is the really interesting in communities. Because I think this whole perception about gender is come from there. And I fix you like when you try to reach out to ground and solve this. Right now, but then is what there's also like there's a shake and I can't listen. You went and up with nothing like that without up to so. But then this thing sometimes it's missing that sometimes like by especially by we used to men for like in concert different all kind of socioeconomic background. Then you realize to because I think in Sri Lanka I think it's again complete the social stigma. People where like random women don't go out back of the men they want wrong. So when we do that, they think that we like them, right? We are interested in them romantically. I get asked out for drinks, and I try to go there and get a comment.
That's right. Have dinner.
Yeah, have dinner. So these are the things that really have to do stupid. And you have to be very careful about with these things. You have to be very diplomatic. You have to explain that you are virgin, so you can't do that. And also,
navigation issues are many.
Unless you want to drop that story, you have to be in good
Yeah.
times with them also. So that is one of the self-interest. The truth it's
Okay, for someone who wants to pursue, especially for girls or like non-white people, who wants to pursue a job in journalism, should they be scared or like is it something that really enriching?
I think there's so much you can do only if you look at the big picture. And every journey will be difficult. Corporate sector, civil society, everywhere you have the same thing. I want to finish by quoting Gloria Steinem, something that I'm someone I really admire. And she says, like, don't leave the campfire. So campfires were originally were, managed by men, right? You sit around this campfire and then talk. And then women would take care of children, bring the food. You lost their narratives. We continue to do that. So I really want to encourage women to come and make sure that their narratives and others' narratives that we, presented through a gender lens can really be enriching and never to deny the community of that valuable contribution.
yeah, I think I will at least a perspective of somebody who left the industry once and came back, right? Like despite all of the problems you will be telling recently, I've said somebody maybe more in journalism that learn a lot. You can see a lot, you can travel a lot. Like so you get experience that nobody like it's like for example last year I kind of finished ownership. So we're on the story on sharks. Right? So it's a very unique opportunity and you get it because you're in the industry. So so I think for anybody who's young, I think despite the developing and evolving landscape, there are still opportunities. It's just a week to diaries. I would drive with the fashions. and the dedication, and then we need to figure out his words later. As long as we can do that, yeah. But I don't think it's impossible. Like nothing is impossible. Like,
Thank you very much for tuning in today. We hope you keep the conversation going about how we can create a more gender inclusive space in journalism. And thank you very much for Internews for supporting the episode and Sri Lanka Press Institute for leading us this amazing space too. Okay.